right, good morning. Selamat pagi. Good morning. You can do better than that. Good morning. All right, let's get started. My name is Ronnie Chatterji. I'm the chief economist of OpenAI. I first want to thank the organizers for a fantastic event. To be here with Tech in Asia, the Business Times, for the Asia Economic Summit is a true honor. I also want to thank Mr. President, the honored cabinet advisors and ministers, all the distinguished guests for a fantastic set of presentations. I'm looking forward to engaging with you throughout the conference, including on a panel discussion that will follow my remarks. I just want to give you a sense of how I'm looking at the impact of AI on the Asian economies from my perspective as the chief economist of OpenAI. I've been here in Indonesia for the last few days and had a fantastic experience. I want to thank all the students, the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the CEOs that I've met all around the country for inspiring me to think about how AI is going to change this country, this region, and the world. Now, as the chief economist, the question that I get asked the most is, tell me about the numbers. Tell me how much AI is going to impact the economy here in Southeast Asia, across Asia more generally, and the world. And if you ask the world's leading economists, you'll get lots of different numbers in terms of how AI will affect annual productivity around the world. We have numbers as low as 0.06% all the way up to 18%. And what I think is interesting here is no matter how large these numbers are as a percentage, we're talking about hundreds and billions of dollars of economic activity. But you might want to know first, why do economists have disagreements over the impact of AI? I can tell you this as someone who has now worked at one of the frontier labs. I have a background in economics, a PhD, professor at Duke University. I worked in the US government for several years as well, doing this kind of analysis. What I've learned here is that we often have divergence before convergence when we have new technologies. It's not immediately obvious when something new is invented, like AI, what the economic impact is going to be. So right now, economists have very different views depending on what their vision is of how AI is going to develop. Now, for some economists, they think about ChatGPT the way it is today. With ChatGPT, you can enter in text and you get a helpful summary back. If you're still using ChatGPT that way in 3 years, the economic impact will probably be relatively low. But if you can use intelligence to solve the most difficult problems your organization is facing, to improve healthcare, education, agriculture, all the sectors that the Honorable Minister spoke about, then the economic impact is going to be much larger. If we can create autonomous agents that can invent new drugs, new medical devices, commercialize new innovations on their own, the economic impact will be transformative. So really what you're seeing over the next decade is a question of how quickly will AI learn to do the most important work in the world, and how will we as humans harness that power to transform economies and societies. And so I think it's quite obvious that economists are not going to figure out the answer in the short term, but it's going to be the people in the audience who are probably going to use this to figure out the answers in your own organization. It's the same question with jobs. The most common question I got today when I spoke to students at the University of Indonesia was, what about jobs? How is it going to affect my job? How will it affect my children's jobs? Some studies show that about 1 in 5 workers are going to be in jobs that are exposed to AI. Others show much higher estimates, about 2 or 3. What we've seen, though, with prior technological transformations is that our jobs are not static. We don't do the same thing in our job we were doing 5 years ago. There's many jobs that we do today that didn't even exist a decade ago. And so it's very difficult, I think, to say that each job that's exposed to AI will be replaced by AI. I think, honestly, when I talk to students today, I say you're more likely to have your job taken by another human who knows AI, not by AI itself. And I think that our students need to acquire the skills to learn how to use AI to their benefits. That really is the bottom line when it comes to jobs. Now, we can learn a lot from previous technologies. Look at these foundational general-purpose technologies that were developed, from the steam engine to electricity to the semiconductor, the integrated circuit.
each of these technologies had a long lag time between when they were invented and when they were implemented. Take the microchip, the computer, the integrated circuit. It was invented in 1958, but it wasn't until the early 1970s that we found uses for it in consumer electronics and eventually computers. And so with AI, we are in what you call the in-between times. The in-between times before these great inventions find their use into everyday products. ChatGPT is just one of those products, but we have many, many more places we can apply intelligence. And right now, what we're going to see here in Asia, but around the world, is how entrepreneurs are finding applications in particular verticals: finance, real estate, energy, for AI. Now, what is going to shape the development of AI? If you look at the economic history of technologies, you'll find three things really matter. Geography matters. When you look at where the IT revolution took place, it was countries that had companies that adopted IT more quickly. A famous study comparing the United States to the United Kingdom found that American firms adopted information technologies, IT, much more quickly than UK-based firms, and they experienced more productivity as a result. And so one big question for firms in Asia, and I talked to many enterprises here in Indonesia as well, is how quickly are they going to adopt the AI tools? Because the quicker they adopt the tools, the more likely they are to get productivity out of them. The other thing that matters is organizations. It has to start from the top. There has to be a commitment from leaders to make sure that AI is being implemented in the organization. We do a lot of work at OpenAI, working with the world's leading companies. And if you have a commitment from the C-suite, CEOs, CTOs, CIOs, it's much more likely that AI will be implemented in the organization. And you need to look for that when you're thinking about where AI is going to take root. And finally, and the Honorable Minister talked about this too, our values matter. We have to make sure that AI is ethical and safe and aligned with human prosperity. And how we deploy it in education, in healthcare, for example, is going to have a huge relevance to how we think about it from our values perspective. When people ask me about technology and jobs, I have a few comments I'd like to share. One is that new innovations don't always substitute for our jobs. They often complement it. For example, my job as an economist, I can use ChatGPT to do many things that I used to do. But it hasn't eliminated my job. I'm here talking to you right now. So I get to focus on the things I enjoy more. I get to focus less on making these slides, which can be made by ChatGPT, and focus more on what I'm going to say, engaging with the audience, building relationships to learn more, to produce more presentations. And so if you think about how you're using OpenAI tools today, like ChatGPT, you'll often find it's complementing what you do and making you more productive. It's also transforming and creating new jobs. When you ask a kid what he wants to be when he grows up, the most common answer now is influencer, okay? Now, we didn't even know what influencers were 20 years ago. But now that we're creating jobs and job titles that didn't exist, the opportunities are going to be endless. And finally, we're going to create innovation around the world that we did not know was possible. Think about the areas of science. If you speak to scientists, they'll describe the scientific process as walking down an endless corridor with doors on either side. The question for the scientist is, where does she spend her life? Where does she look behind the door and do her research? But now AI can look behind those doors for us and guide the human to the areas that are most fruitful to work on. That's going to rapidly accelerate the rate of discovery, invention, and innovation. This is where the promise of AI for economic growth is really going to matter. Now, a couple things that make AI different that I want to leave you with and I can talk about later in the panel. One is just the sheer speed. This is a chart that shows you how quickly ChatGPT was adopted. We reached 100 million active users in just 2 months. And I won't say anything else about all these other fantastic products, but it's the quickest in terms of adoption that I've ever seen. And so while we can use lessons from the past, the internet, social media, enterprise software, to understand OpenAI, ChatGPT, generative AI, this is just happening a lot faster than it's ever happened before. That's important to note. The second thing I want to tell you is that the capabilities are increasing very fast. This is a chart that shows you the number of years it takes for AI to achieve certain benchmarks. We call this saturating benchmarks. In the early days, these benchmarks would take 2 decades, 19 years, 20 years to be saturated, to be achieved. But now, we're seeing the capabilities increase much faster, 1 to 2 years, and we're beating these benchmarks. So it's not just that AI is being adopted so quickly. it's also becoming more powerful more quickly. And this is something I've learned from being inside OpenAI. And the last piece is it's coming at a much lower cost. If you think about the cost per million tokens being $66 in 2023, it's now come down to about 13 cents. You know, one thing I've learned being here in Indonesia, traveling the region, is the cost-value trade-off is real. People tell me they want to use our tools. Many are using the free versions here in Indonesia and around the region, but they want more access and wider access. And that's one of the reasons that OpenAI is releasing an open weights model, as many of you know, that's going to be available all around the world for people to build and develop around. And I'm excited to see that because I think here in Indonesia, it'll get fantastic uses in addition to our existing models. And how we do that, how we roll that out over the next few months is something I'm very excited to share with you. Now, the minister mentioned that there is regional disparity in terms of where computing power is located. One of the things that will determine the future of AI is where the data centers and compute are located. A recent analysis shows you that the United States and China are where most of this compute power is located. And that's why it's so important to develop in Southeast Asia compute and data centers to make sure the innovators here have access to the most cutting-edge tools. Right now, without big investments around the world, a new kind of digital divide could emerge. Let me just share some data, and then I'll wrap up about how we're seeing this in Asia from the perspective of OpenAI. India, Indonesia, and Japan are the top 3 APAC countries for weekly active users. India, Japan, and South Korea are the top 3 for developers. Just to talk about Indonesia for a second, Indonesia is very strong on the user side of ChatGPT, but it still needs to increase the number of developers who are building on top of the API. That's a key area for growth that I expect. However, the growth has been amazing. We've seen a tripling of users in Indonesia over the last year. So I expect that to continue to increase going forward. In Asia, weekly active users have grown 7x over the past year. So we're seeing tremendous growth in this area. How are people in Asia learning using AI? One out of every 5 messages with ChatGPT is using AI to learn. If you think about this platform and what it's good for, most of the messages that Asians are sending are to learn. But that's not all. You're also seeing people to use ChatGPT to help them with writing, editing, whether it's English language or in their native languages, to make translations work better. You're also seeing a large number of people using it to make images or creative products. About 7% of the messages are here. Okay, this is especially popular in Indonesia right now. I will just leave you with a couple things about how I think Asia should leverage these technologies. One is you need to invest in energy, particularly clean energy and infrastructure. This is going to be the key to driving the AI revolution here and around the world. Second, the workforce piece. You're graduating 300,000 STEM graduates here in Indonesia and many, many more around the region. It'd be important for those people to know how to build with AI. And that's why I'll be watching the number of Asian students who are building using our tools and our APIs. And to build an AI-ready economy, His Honorable Mr. President mentioned this, different sectors are going to need to adopt AI. And one thing to watch around Asia is thinking about which sectors are the most aggressive adopters of AI. Will it be finance? Will it be retail and commerce? Will it be real estate and energy? This is something to look at. I think in Indonesia specifically, just because we are here, a couple things. The adoption rate is amazing here. It needs to transition from becoming just adopters to creators. And that means building on the APIs, having our developers create products here, local solutions for problems that Indonesians are facing. I think this is going to be really important. And this will only happen if you have a broader digital push. Without access to the internet, without a broader digitization of government services, for example, we won't be able to see the potential of AI in this country or the region as a whole. With that, I want to thank you for your attention, thank the organizers, and looking forward to joining you on the panel. Thank you.